Hey guys, so I thought I'd just do a quick video to talk about what is it like to live in Saudi Arabia. As some of you already know, I live in Saudi Arabia. I'm currently living and working in Saudi Arabia, and I'm just here on my balcony at the moment. It's a Friday, and Friday and Saturday are the weekend in Saudi Arabia. Unlike most of the world where you have Saturday and Sunday, Friday is actually a typical day of rest in Saudi Arabia. It's an Islamic day of rest because most people go to the mosque on a Friday with their families for the noonday prayer and sermon. Of course, people go to the mosque 5 times a day in Saudi Arabia. People are very religious here, and including at dawn, which is between around 4 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. But the noon prayer is it's like between around 11:30 and 12, roughly speaking. So that's when people go during the middle of the day, and there's 3 other prayers that they do as well. But I won't go into that at the moment. But yeah, so what is it actually like to live in Saudi Arabia? Well, it depends, obviously, if you are a Westerner like myself, or if you are a Saudi Arabian citizen, or a foreign worker from another country. They all have very different experiences of living here. And I don't want to go into sort of a lot of negativity about the country. There's a lot of negative press about Saudi Arabia, but in day-to-day life, it's actually it's not that bad. It's not that bad to live here. It's actually quite interesting, and yeah, you can hear the traffic. There's a lot of traffic, obviously, in cities. At the moment, I'm living in a city called Al Khobar in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, also called Al Sharqiyya, which is on the Persian Gulf, or as the Saudis and other Arabs like to say, the Arabian Gulf, but of course in English we call it the Persian Gulf. And yeah, just give you a brief view of my area at the moment, which is sort of a typical neighborhood, quiet neighborhood in Al Khobar, and yeah, not a lot going on. I mean, Saudi Arabia is a pretty quiet country, and I'm a quiet person, so you know, I don't go out to nightclubs. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. So I don't even drink alcohol. So those kind of elements actually suit me. As you're probably aware, alcohol is illegal in this country, as is drug consumption and a lot of other similar things. And of course, I don't do any of that stuff anyway, so that doesn't really affect me at all. Obviously, being male, it's a very different experience if you're living here as a female, but there are Westerners who live here as females, and you know, they don't have too many issues. There are more restrictions. Yeah, you have to wear an abaya, which is like a sort of dress or robe that you wear over your ordinary clothing if you're a woman when you're outdoors in public. But obviously, if you live in a compound or other Western area, or inside your house or whatever on your balcony, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so there are some restrictions which follow the very conservative Islamic society that we have here. It's obviously it's a monarchy, sort of absolute monarchy, but there's a Shura Council, I believe, as well. I haven't studied the Saudi political system in depth, but there is currently a king, King Salman, and yeah, it's in many respects it's actually quite westernized. Lots of Western restaurants. People watch YouTube a lot. A lot of people are learning English or know some English, and yeah, it's a very mixed place because there's a lot of Indians, a lot of Bangladeshis, a lot of Westerners, a lot of different nationalities that live here. So yeah, the country relies on a lot of foreign labor, though there is Saudiization as well, in which they have to have certain quotas of Saudi workers in each company. So that's quite it's sort of a move to increase the employment rate among Saudi citizens. So there's not a lot of buses, but as you can see, there's actually a bus going down there, probably mostly foreign workers who use the buses here. There's not really a very good public transport system. Most people have cars and prefer to drive themselves around. And as you probably heard recently, women are actually going to be allowed to drive soon once they set up the infrastructure to allow that to happen. So that's going to happen soon as well. So that's those are a few of the main facts about Saudi Arabia. I was actually recently given a book which is quite interesting. I thought I'd just mention it here, called The Bro Code of Saudi Culture. And I haven't finished reading it. I've just read a few pages of it basically. So I'm not going to do a proper book review on this book, but yeah, the author apparently was doing some kind of book signing, and he gave a copy to one of my friends, who then gave me a free copy as well. He got a few free copies to give away, so just been looking through it. It's called The Bro Code of Saudi Arabia by Abdul Al-Lili, or Lili. I'm not sure how to actually pronounce his name. I can read Arabic names, but when they're written in the Arabic script, so I'm not sure how you pronounce that name exactly. But yeah, it's an interesting book because it's written by a Saudi, and it says The Bro Code of Saudi Culture, 661 rules on how the human body should act inside Arabia. So if you're actually interested in an insider perspective on Saudi culture and how Saudis themselves behave, and what the actual rules are regarding women, and this is all approved by the Saudi press, or however they go through book approval processes in this country, because books have to be approved before they're published. So everything in this book's approved, and it's quite interesting. For example, it says, number 1, Saudi society is divided into 2 domains: a domestic inside the house domain and a public outside the house domain. Women are responsible for and belong to the domestic domain. Men are in command of and are affiliated with the public domain. So that's giving the interesting distinction between women who live within this sort of domestic world and men who live in the public world. So women tend to be kept within a certain restricted domain. This is obviously referring to Saudi women and not necessarily to the experience of Western women or others in Saudi Arabia, Saudi culture. When entering the public domain, women are escorted by an inside member of their domain, that is, a related man. Women do not drive or ride a bike or motorbike, nor do they walk even for a short distance, given that these activities take place in the public domain. The female domestic domain has its own national school curriculum. Only women study home economics, which teaches them how to be effective members of their domestic domain. So it's talking about the different roles and functions of women in society. And of course, Saudi Arabia may be a bit different from Western countries, but this trend of women having different roles in society can be found in many cultures and goes back many thousands of years, so it shouldn't actually surprise people too much. Let's skip ahead and see some other things it has to say here. It talks about weddings, marriages, education. Interestingly, it mentions how men can teach women in Saudi Arabia, but not face to face. So, for example, it says face to face, men, with the exception of blind men, do not teach women. There are only two conditions whereby men can teach women. In the first condition, men can teach women via a video conferencing system. Women see and hear men, but men only hear women. A female coordinating assistant is present in the student's area, assisting the teacher with class management. So that's interesting. Men can teach women, but I don't think it's vice versa as far as I'm aware. Other things. Currently, cameras have become popular. This is 142 on page 32. Currently, cameras have become popular. Many Saudis take pictures of almost everything and are active users of Instagram and Snapchat. I've noticed that a lot. Snapchat is really popular here, much more popular than Facebook at the moment. And I think Saudi Arabia is one of the top countries that uses social media. People are addicted, especially the younger generation, are very addicted to using their phones. They love their mobile phones, and it's maybe one of the main sources of entertainment that they have. Loud traffic outside, a lot of trucks and things come by. Yeah, first, this is 241 on page 54. First, many Saudis are active users of such social networks and enjoy forwarding messages. What else? There were social campaigns. When one stops at traffic lights, there are signs next to them reminding one of traditional norms and values. Such signs are not put up by the tradition agency, but rather by people themselves. People are encouraged to do that because they believe that every time a driver reads the sign, they will get a holy reward. Interesting. I've seen things like that. There are signs which are sort of religious signs in Arabic that you sometimes see on the roads or on the highways that say things like stuff like Allahu Akbar, which means like God is most great, or what else? La ilaha illallah, which means there is no God but God. Maybe things like Subhanallah, glorified be God, or Udhkurullah, which is like mention God. There's a lot of stuff like that, or short sentences from the Quran. In most restaurants and offices and places, you'll find some kind of calligraphic Quranic inscriptions as well, in Arabic, of course, not in English. So if you know any Arabic, it's you can read those. So yeah, there's mosques everywhere. I don't know if you can see, but there are some minarets around my area. You might be able to notice them. There are it's got to be at least 4 or 5 mosques within about 5 minutes walk or less from where I am. So during the prayer times, it's not prayer time yet, I think there's at least another hour or so before the next prayer time, you can hear the call to prayer called the adhan, which goes off 5 times a day, including at dawn. I tend not to hear it in the morning if I'm already sleeping, but sometimes I'm awake at that time, so I'll hear the dawn prayer. So yeah, sometimes they just have the call to prayer, which is blasted on the loudspeaker, and sometimes also you get to hear the full prayer or sermon, I think usually on Fridays, but I've heard it at other times as well. I'm not sure. I think it might vary from mosque to mosque. I'm not sure. So yeah, so that's just a few things, guys, about Saudi Arabia. So if you've never been here, you're interested in what is it like to be in Saudi Arabia, or maybe you're even afraid, what is Saudi Arabia like? Is it dangerous or something like that? No, it's not dangerous. It's one of the safest countries you could possibly visit, and there are very few restrictions especially if you're male and you come from a Western country. You will have no problems at all. There's no danger. There's nothing to worry about. Obviously, there's not really tourist visas to come and visit Saudi Arabia. You have to have either a work visa or a work visit visa or business visa. So if you're working here temporarily, but if you teach English as an EFL teacher, you can easily get a contract to come to Saudi Arabia, even just to experience what it's like, or to save up some money, because it's tax-free actually in Saudi Arabia. If you live here, you don't pay any taxes. So yeah, it's quite an interesting place. Or you can come here, if you're a Muslim, you can come here on an Umrah visa or a Hajj visa, as you're probably already aware. So there are a few different visas you can come on. If you work here permanently with an Iqama, then you can bring your family either on an Iqama or on a family visit visa. So that's another way to get in the country. But generally, other than those methods, or if you're a GCC citizen, Gulf citizen of Bahrain or Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, probably Oman, a few of these places, then you can come and visit Saudi Arabia without a visa. So, but if you don't have any of those means, then you obviously can't come here. So the closest you could probably get would be to come to Bahrain or the United Arab Emirates, UAE, Dubai and Abu Dhabi and those kind of places. But they're a bit different from Saudi Arabia. There's a different vibe, there's a different feeling to being in Saudi Arabia, which is a much more conservative country. But anyway, so if you're curious, then certainly read more about it. And yeah, I would definitely recommend this book. It's at least, it is informative, but it's also quite humorous as well. So yeah, The Bro Code of Saudi Arabia. It's a good book. Right, guys, so that's all for now. Talk to you soon.